Okay, so it's now half past and it's time to get started. So first of all, welcome to the high-tech webinar on growth. Now, this webinar is one that might get you thinking in a slightly different way about growth. So before we get started, it's a good idea to have a pen and paper close to you so that you can write down any ideas or light bulb moments that you have along the way. So grab a pen and paper and we are ready to get going. Now, first, I'm just going to spend a minute telling you who we are and who I am and why we're talking to you about growth today. High-tech has been a supplier to the European self-storage industry for the last 20 years, roughly. It started out as a software company, it grew into an IT company, and now it's also a consultancy company. Our team consists mainly of people who have a lot of experience from the self-storage industry before they joined us. So we actually, in our team, that consists of 8 people, we actually have over 60 years of combined experience within our company. And that's really how our consultancy business kicked off. We're very much like a one-stop shop for IT solutions for the European self-storage industry. We can help with everything from an individual piece of software to delivering an entire IT environment with email and printing and backups and everything else that goes with it. And on top of that, our team consults and advises on anything from strategy to marketing, internal auditing, and much more. Our existing clients are mainly in Europe, but we have a few clients outside Europe as well, and we service both bigger chains and smaller operators. As I said, we're a team of 8 people, and our head office is in the Netherlands, not far from Amsterdam. So who am I, and why am I talking to you about growth today? I've been a self-storage professional since 2002. I started off working in a store while I was a student, and I became a store manager. And then once I'd finished my studies, I continued on as a regional manager in what was then one of the biggest European self-storage chains. Eventually, I became responsible for their IT on a group level. They operated in 7 different countries at the time. I also, as part of my studies, completed an MBA. And as part of that, I decided to research how the European recession back in 2007 and 2008 was affecting the marketing messaging in the self-storage market, and to look closer at how the recession could be turned into an opportunity from a marketing point of view. How should a self-storage company adjust their marketing in order to make the most of the recession? That was basically the question that I researched. I then spent a few years away from the self-storage industry, and I worked with more general business consultancy across a number of different sectors. And then about 3.5 years ago, I came back into the self-storage industry when I joined high-tech. Now, as a consultant, I've worked with over 100 businesses across Europe, and these businesses have been spread across a number of different sectors. But common for all of this consultancy work has been that growth has been at the core of what these companies wanted to achieve. So growth is a topic that I've spent a lot of time working on in a very practical way. And that is what I'll be sharing with you today, is the fundamental approach that I think is the most effective when you want to get serious about achieving solid growth. Not the one-off sudden peaks in performance, but really solid and lasting growth. So where do we start with growth? Well, the first place to start is to get clear on what growth is for you. What it is specifically that you're looking to grow. Is it your top line, more on the revenue side? Is it the bottom line and profits? Or is it that you simply want more customers? Just think for a second about what it is that growth means to you, and what the one number that you would like to grow in your business is. Now, just now I mentioned customers, revenue, and profits as being desired outcomes for growth. And these are the most common answers I get when I ask businesses, what's the number one thing that you want to grow in your business? The thing is with these 3, customers, revenue, and profits, that these are not drivers of growth in themselves. They're outcomes, they're results. So the first thing we need to do is identify what are the drivers of growth for these numbers. So we start with customers. What drives your customers? What drives the number of customers in your business? Well, it's the number of inquiries that you get from potential customers, people who contact you and who are considering buying, renting from you. And then it's the conversion rate, the percentage of how many of these potential customers actually turn into customers of yours. These are the two drivers behind your number of customers. In the same way, your revenue is made up of an additional two drivers. So the customers that you got, they spend money with you a certain number of times spread across a year, and they spend a certain average amount. So if you take your number of customers and you multiply this by how much and how many times your customers spend with you, then this gives you your revenue figures. And finally, there's one additional driver of your profits, and that's, of course, your profit margins. So this is what I like to call the 5 drivers of growth. So let's add some numbers to the formula that I just showed you. Let's assume that over the course of a year, we have a pretty small storage facility, and it's got 1,000 inquiries spread over a year. That's roughly 20 a week. The conversion rate is quite low, it's 30%. And that means that over the course of the year, the store will have 300 new customers. These 300 customers of yours spend money with you 6 times throughout the year. Your average length of stay is 4 months. And then over the course of those 4 months, the customer also buys retail products from you twice. So that's 6 transactions in total. The average value of those 6 transactions is 75 euros every time. So you've got 300 new customers every year. They buy from you 6 times at an average price of 75 euros. That gives you a revenue of 135,000. Now, our store's margins are 25%. That's quite low for a typical storage facility, but I've also tried to put numbers in here that are easy in terms of illustrating the growth that we're going to go into in a minute. So our store's margins are 25%. That means that the store ends up with a profit of 33,750 euros for the year. And now this is where the fun starts, because this is now when we're going to start talking about growth. So let's say that we're going to aim to achieve, to increase each of these drivers, each of the factors, by 10% over the course of an entire year. Where do we start with that? Where do we go? We have 5 drivers, and which one do we start with? Well, the first question is, do you know what these numbers are for your business? If you don't know what these drivers are, if you don't know them by heart, or you can't look them up within a minute, then that's the first place to start. You need to know the numbers of your current drivers of growth. When we start looking at these drivers for growth, the most common approach is to start at the top, at inquiries and marketing spending. And in all honesty, a lot of companies don't actually move past that first line when they're trying to grow. They go and they spend money on marketing to get more inquiries, and that is one component of growth. But the thing is that if you start there, the investment into marketing and sales often ends up being a quite inefficient use of your money, your resources. Why is that? Well, it's because if you haven't yet optimized your conversion rate, if you haven't optimized your number of transactions, your average spend, and your margins, then you're not optimizing the opportunities that are already coming your way. And then you aren't really in a position to make the absolute most of those new inquiries that you then spend marketing money getting. So the solid approach to growth comes from turning things upside down and starting from the bottom and working your way up. Starting by making the most of the opportunities that are already coming your way. And then once all of these are optimized, then you add more marketing and sales to the mix and get a much bigger return on the money that you invest in those activities. So that's why we're going to start by talking about margins. So working on your margins is not only about cost cutting or putting your prices up, but these are 2 ways of achieving better margins, of course. Now, our webinar next month is actually going to be on the topic of pricing. So if pricing is an area that you want to work on, then you should definitely tune in then. It's run by my colleague who's actually done research on something called gambled pricing discounts, which is really interesting stuff. So if pricing is something you want to work on, then do join us in a month. So working on margins in the long term, apart from looking at cutting costs and putting your prices up, it can also include being very strategic in how you choose to add value to your customers, who you decide to target in your marketing, and what kind of brand you're building. Building a brand is a lot about building trust. And if customers trust you, then they're likely to be less price sensitive. For example, when is the last time you reviewed the discounts that you offer and evaluated different discount options against each other and worked out which discount would attract the least price-sensitive customers And also, which discount would have the smallest impact on your bottom line? Because there are lots of ways of putting together attractive discount offers that impact your bottom line less than other discounts. So if this isn't something that you've reviewed for a while, then that's a great place to start. And then, of course, it's a question of reviewing things like your opening hours, your unavailable units, looking at what you charge for your retail products and your insurances, and see if you might be able to charge more in certain areas, less in other areas, but that you end up with a final result of higher margins for your business. Remember, we're only aiming for a 10% increase here. So what we're talking about is increasing the margins of this store from 25% to 27.5%. Which, if you start looking at some of the things that I just talked about, is really quite a realistic, doable aim when you're looking at this over a 12-month period. We've looked at margins, and so we're going to hop up to the next driver of growth from the bottom, and that is average spend. There we go. My slide just decided to not cooperate, but now it is. So average spend is the amount of money that customers spend with you each time they buy from you. They buy from you each month when they rent their storage, and they also buy from you each time they buy retail or other services from you. So where do we start if we want to increase our average spend by 10% over an entire year? Well, first up is the old management saying of what gets measured gets done. I've seen a number of times that simply measuring the average spend makes it go up because staff are just more focused on it. You can, of course, look at pricing and your discounts, like we just talked about, for margins as well. There might be extra services or charges that you could be adding to your offering. You might be able to expand the range of retail products that you offer so that people can buy more things from you. And one of the most simple but also effective ways that I've seen the average spend being increased in the self-storage industry is by offering a free move-in checklist where all the retail products are listed and where customers can tick a box for the ones they need. You can even build in little recommendations in the checklist to make it even easier for customers to buy that little bit extra from you. And then you can look at how you bundle up products and services to increase that average spend. Doing complete move-in packages where people don't really need to think about how much retail they need to buy from you. You give them a recommendation and they just buy a complete package from you. So this is really sort of looking at the storage version of the McDonald's famous phrase, do you want fries with that? So ask yourself, what are your fries? So now again, we're looking only for a 10% increase over the course of an entire year. So that would take the average spend from 75 euros to 82.50, sorry. So if you worked on just say 3, 4, 5 things in this area over the course of a year, increasing this by 10%, it seems pretty realistic, doesn't it? We're going to continue our bottom-up approach, and that means that next on our list is number of transactions. Again, measuring it is a great place to start because focus alone will bring up the number. Movers are often the bread and butter customers of self-storage sites, but the downside is that they often don't stay very long. So if you review your marketing, how big a portion of it is actually targeting customer segments that will stay longer than your average mover will? What are you doing to educate your movers about the different ways that self-storage can be used after they've completed their move? Of course, you're not going to convert every mover into a long-term customer, but again, we're looking for a 10% increase here. Are you tying your discounts to the number of transactions? So in other words, rewarding the customers that stay with you a bit longer or that prepay? And how much are you doing to stay in touch with customers who have moved out but might need storage sometime in the future? There are lots of things that can be done to increase the number of times people will buy from you during a year. And we don't have time to go into all of them here. But if you missed our webinar last month on customer loyalty, then that's a great place to start for some inspiration in that area. So a 10% increase of the number of transactions would take us from 6 transactions to an average of 6.6 over the course of an entire year. Now, again, this is something that seems realistic and doable, doesn't it? So we're moving up the list again, and the next one is conversion rate. Conversion rate is definitely one of those that increases once you start measuring it. It's amazing what focus alone can achieve with conversion rates. And then there's sales training. And this is a really big one. At High Tech, all of our sales training is based on a simple model for identifying different personality types. Just imagine what a difference it would make to conversion rates if everyone who was in contact with customers in your business would be able to identify someone's personality type in less than a minute, and then know how they should adapt their style of selling to fit that specific type. I've seen some incredible results when you take this approach to sales. And actually, in the next few months, we'll be launching our in-house sales training as an online program so that anyone can benefit from this kind of training. So apart from being able to sell to all different personality types, increasing your conversion rate is about reducing the barriers or the risks related to buying from you. One way of doing that is to offer a guarantee. It can be a price guarantee, a satisfaction guarantee, a size guarantee. There are lots of ways to put together a powerful guarantee, and we don't have time to go into all the specifics about this in this short webinar, but the principles of a guarantee is a powerful one because it reduces the risk that customers perceive from doing business with you. If there's a satisfaction money back type guarantee, then what have they got to lose from choosing you? Nothing, right? So they're more likely to buy from you. Some businesses are skeptical of guarantees because they're worried that customers will take advantage of it. But there are ways of structuring guarantees so that you can make sure that that doesn't really happen. Apart from guarantees, you can also display testimonials from current or past customers where they describe in their own words why they've been happy to rent from you. You can put them on your website, you can put them in your sales office or around the site itself. You can also review your sales process and see where it can be improved. For example, if you don't have a separate sales process for business customers versus private customers, then it's definitely a good idea to review that. So in our example, that means that we're increasing the conversion rate from 3% to 33%, only a 10% increase. Again, a very small increase. And in my experience, when businesses really start working on some of the stuff, just a few of the things I just mentioned, I've seen businesses double their conversion rate in just a few months. So a 10% increase is very, very cautious, but we're keeping the numbers down here. So this is pretty small increase, very, very doable. This brings us to the very top of the list, which is inquiries. So we finally get to spend some money on marketing. Now, measuring your number of inquiries will not increase the inquiries as with the other ones, but it's a really important number to know in your business so that you can know whether the marketing that you're doing is actually having the kind of effect that you're looking for. A lot of purchase decisions are made online these days, so to work on your inquiries, you just cannot ignore your website. Make sure it's optimized for website conversions into inquiries, and there are a number of different tricks of the trade for how you can optimize the conversion once people are on your website. Look at what you're doing with search engine optimizations and with AdWord campaigns. We have a whole separate webinar on online marketing that you'll find on our YouTube channel. So if you want some inspiration, there's plenty to find there. And get really active on referrals, getting your current customers to do your selling for you. Again, there are ways of structuring referral offerings that make it more attractive for people and that gets them more active in referring new customers to you. And then it's about marketing and about making yourself visible. Start with low-cost marketing initiatives and then measure the results. Try something different or try something that you haven't done for a while. Chances are that if you do that, you'll reach potential customers that haven't heard from you in a while, and you'll start seeing increases in inquiries pretty quickly. So again, in our example here, we're just looking for a 10% increase over the course of an entire year. So we're going from 1,000 inquiries a year to 1,100. That's roughly 2 extra a week. Again, pretty doable, pretty realistic, and pretty cautious. So the question now is, how much have we then grown by if we do all this stuff? Our inquiries times our conversion rate gives us our number of customers. Now, even though we've only increased each of those 2 drivers by 10%, you'll see that the increase in the number of customers is higher than that 10%, right? It's actually 21%. because there's a compounding effect of these individual growth factors. So our number of customers has increased by 21% over the course of a year. That's a pretty good start. Our number of customers is multiplied by the number of transactions and the average spend, and that gives us a revenue figure that is now just under 198,000 euros. Again, there's a compounding effect of these changes working in conjunction with each other here. So that means that our revenue has actually increased by 46%. And then we get to the profits. Our revenue is multiplied by our margins, and that leaves us with a profit of just over 54,000 euros. That's a 61% increase in profits. And that is the anatomy of growth. That is how solid but powerful growth is achieved. It's not a question of finding one new revolutionizing idea that in itself will grow the business in a completely new way. That's often the way many people think about growth of this magnitude. But it's not that. It's about the exact opposite of that, actually. It's a question of knowing your numbers, breaking them down into key drivers, and then it's about working on each of those drivers little by little and working on them simultaneously. Then you let all of those factors work together to grow the business in a really powerful, but also really solid way. That's what some people call the law of compounding effects, or the way I prefer to say it, break it down to build it up. Now, before we finish up, I just want to quickly tell you how high tech can help if this area of growth is something that you'd like to work on a bit more. In 2 weeks, we'll be running a 3-hour online workshop about growth, where we'll talk you through all of these different steps, but in much greater detail. For each of these growth drivers that we've just talked about, we give you a sheet of between 30 and 50 ideas that you can review and choose from. So we've done some of the legwork for you. It's like inspiration overload. From there, you work through to a detailed action plan of all of this so that when you finish the 3 hours, you have a plan for what you're going to do when and what you're going to take action on. Often the most difficult thing in business is finding the time to work on these longer term questions, which are really important, but that often get pushed down the priority list because more urgent things come along. So this workshop is really about creating the time and the space for you to spend 3 hours where all you're working on is a growth plan, and giving you lots of tools and ideas along the way to help you in that process. Now, because we're delivering this online, we can keep the price down to only 129 euros per person. So there should be no reason why everyone can't join this. Then there's a sales training that I mentioned earlier, where we use a really simple but very effective model for personality profiling and combine it with sales training. We can come to your business and deliver it, but in a few months, it'll also be available as an online training program, like I mentioned. So if you're interested in this training program, then just get in touch with us and we'll put you on the email list for when it's launched. And then I mentioned your website earlier, which really needs to be optimized to make the most of online traffic. Now, this website review that we offer is a bit like an audit of your website. We look through every single aspect of it. We look at how well it's performing in search engines, how strong your website is on conversions. We look on the technical side and the programming side to see that that's also optimized. And then we make a report where you can see what's really good and what you should keep doing. And then our points of recommendations and improvements so that you can improve your results from your website even more. Now, if any questions have popped up along the way during this webinar, then you're welcome to get in touch with us. We're always happy to answer emails and or phone calls for that matter, and have a quick chat about the topics on this webinar. So feel free to get in touch if you want to. And the next webinar we have, which is also completely free and open to everyone in the self-storage industry, is on the 21st of March, and it's on pricing, powerful pricing in self-storage. So with that, there's only one thing left for me to do, and that is to thank you for joining us today. Like I said, if you have any questions relating to what we talked about today, feel free to get in touch and we'll be happy to have a quick chat with you. So thank you for today, and I wish you all the best of luck with your growth.